It is Black History Month in America, and I'm really late to the game. I wanted to give you a well-rounded list for Black history in America. This month, I'm just reading diverse books in general. However, I did want to spend just a little bit of time with Black history just in America. And the last book I have on this subject for this month that I wanted to read still is Passing by Nella Larson. If you liked The Vanishing Half, I really think you'd like this book. I've talked about this book before in a video. This book was first published in 1929, and this is about a woman who passes as white, and she has a white husband who is incredibly racist, and she meets a Black woman that she becomes friends with, and she really admires and misses her heritage. I only have a couple days left this month, so I shouldn't have any problem finishing it. Another book I read this month was The Reformatory. This is by Tananarive Due. This is a social justice read. This shows you a part of history that is so ugly, and it's still something that I think that we struggle today. Looking at a community that's poor, putting them away somewhere and not having to worry about them anymore. But we have this Black kid who he kicks a landowner, he kicks him in the shin because he was standing up for his sister. And it gets him sent to this reformatory for 6 months. And ideally, it's supposed to make this boy into an upstanding citizen. There's something that is referred to in this book that really happened in history in Arkansas. So it's kind of a nod to that and a very scary part of this book, and is what makes this a horror story ultimately. This is a horror story. So if you're not interested in learning this history through horror style, I would recommend The Nickel Boys by Colston Whitehead. I think that's what the author's name is. It tells you the same type of story, talks about the reformatory, that very real reformatory, and the same situation that this refers to is in that book. So it's a historical read. It wasn't my type of writing style, which is why I don't have the book anymore. I gave it to my mom. I think she would enjoy it a lot more. I wouldn't say this is so scary of a horror book. It's horror, I think, more because it's so horrific. The events that have happened, maybe it's a little bit more detailed in what had happened, which to me is so important for me to really understand and grasp that horror, because it did happen. I really liked it a lot. In that similar vein, we have Ringout by P. Jelly Clark. This is also social justice, and I just think, and it is a horror story. It is speculative. We have a man who's a Black man who has this magic sword, and he goes out trying to kill these monsters, these alien type of monsters that are dressed up in the Ku Klux Klan garb. And what they do is they feed on this fear. They have many, many mouths, you can see in the picture, and they feed off of this fear that they're mongering out there. And the way that they spread this fear is by a movie called Birth of a Nation, which is a very true movie, and the reason why there was such a huge amount of fear back in the day, how it started. I just love this way of reading history. I just think that you can get to the truth in a fun way. I loved it. I have 2 books here. Both of them talk about the slavery in America. This is Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. This is also horrifying, but it's not a horror. It is historical fiction. With The Yellow Wife is what they would call Black women who ended up marrying slave owners, or not marrying them, but being their mistresses. They were treated differently. However, they were still very much slaves. They were very much forced into this role of loving on these men that were giving them a better life because of that title of Yellow Wife. In this book, there are true accounts of very specific ways of slaves being tortured and abused. They came straight out of real slaves' mouths and documentation that this author researched and looked and very thoroughly looked into these accounts and put them in this book. So what you read is very real, and it will feel like there's no way this could have really happened. In the back of the book, it gives you very detailed resources and sightings for all these things, these horrible things that happened within the book. So I do think this is a very important read, and everyone should read at least something like this once. This is Reriving Me Home. This talks about the Emancipation Act and what happened when that first came about. When the Emancipation Act was announced, that the slave owners would say, no, we'll just say that you're no longer slaves, but now you are our apprentices and you still have to work for free and you can't leave. And there was still that same treatment and there was nowhere for them to go. And even if they did leave, what would they do? You also have that history of women who were slaves and their children taken away from them and sold throughout all over the place. She had like 5 or 7 babies who were taken from her and sold, and she was never able to see them again. So she escaped. She went and tried to find all these children and to see what happened to them. And I just thought this was very interesting to see what freedom looked like throughout the country, because she does travel everywhere. That brings me to 2 nonfictions that I think are extremely important. If you don't read anything else in this video, read these 2 books. The first one is How the World is Passed by Clint Smith. He went to Thomas Jefferson's plantation, who is known in history as being for freeing slaves and being more pushing for freedom and rights to slaves. However, he had a plantation full of slaves, and he is able to get his hands on the books that Jefferson kept, detailing all of his slaves, when he sold them, the breeding of his slaves. Like, it just sounded very much like this plantation, he's just raising cattle. As you read, you realize this is his discovery as much as ours. He's not just informing us for something that he already knew. This is his discovery of this information as he discovers it. He even visits this Confederacy get together, this meeting, and he tries to have an open mind going in there and talking to them, not in a way that's showing them being dumb or anything like that, which I really enjoyed, because he showed that they're very intelligent and the way that they see things and how they perceive this situation and why they still hold these meetings. So he documents that, and then he goes to New York, and New York is known for being the place where Black people wanted to go to during slavery times because they had freedom. But what freedom looked like in New York is not what we had pictured in our mind. This book is just the most important book that I think I've ever read, and I recommend everyone to read it. And that goes for The Color of Law. This is why we are in the situation we are in. It does not give you answers, however. It's not going to say if we just did this, it would make everything go away. This very much states that there's no good way to get out of this situation. Why the poor community is so heavily Black community. And it was so informative, so smart. It's just very much how we got into the situation we got into. And a lot of it has to do with banks and realtors, which was really surprising to me. So read this, and then I think you just will have a better understanding. And then I want to talk to you about the poor community. These 2 books, Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez and Night Crawling by Leila Motley. These 2 books are so great in different ways, showing poor Black community and the treatment of those communities. First, Take My Hand, it talks more about Roe versus Wade, when we have poor communities, how little choices they're given, and the ugly things that we have done in the past, which I think we've came a long ways to correct this, and why it's so important to keep fighting for our rights, especially for these Black poor communities. It's pretty disgusting, actually, and shocking when you read this book. We have this woman who is a nurse. Her dad's a doctor. She goes and she works for like a Planned Parenthood type of organization. And she goes to these two little girls who are like 9 and 11 or something like that. One of them doesn't even have their period yet. And she's forcing a birth control shot into these children who have no idea what's going on. And the father of the two little girls, it's just him taking care of these girls. The mom passed away, and he cannot read. He did not finish school. He's trying to support this family and do the best he can, but he does not understand what he's signing. He has no knowledge. It's a shocking perspective. So interesting, because there's even things in this book that I caught myself thinking, oh my gosh, I've thought these things before, and this is despicable that I thought these things. Now, it puts things into a different perspective, and I love books that can do that. And then we have this one where we have a girl and her brother. I read this a year ago. I think her mom and dad died, and their uncle makes really good money far away, and they're trying to get a hold of him to let him know that they are poor, living in this crumbling apartment with nothing and no food, and they're having a really hard time trying to make ends meet. And her brother he's really trying to be this musician, and that's what he's focused on, and he's so certain and sure of himself that this is what's going to get them out. But in the meantime, she has to, and she's the younger one, she has to find ways to make money so that way they can have food on their table that day. So she's trying to support her brother and his dreams and be not a negative person, but she gets shown into a world of night crawling, which is prostitution. And she's very young. I think she's only like 12, 13 years old. And she realizes she can make a lot of money this way. It's just this is a tragic, sad story. And I really enjoyed reading it, but only because of all the emotions that it brought out in me. Definitely recommend. And then if you want a book that just gives you an overall history of like everything, we have Homegoing by Ya Gayasi. This is a book, I think I just recently talked about this one too. This gives you a family tree at the very beginning of the book because you definitely need it. It's a 300-year span of history. It's a generational story. And we start out with these two half-sisters that are born in different villages. And one of them gets married off to some British soldier, while the other one is running and hiding and staying in Ghana. This split of this family and what life looks like for somebody who stays in Ghana, and what a life looks like when you go straight to America. And it comes full circle in the end after 300 years. Full history type of story told in just 300 pages, which is pretty remarkable. Then we have the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. This is by Honori Finani Jeffers. This book is a lot like Homegoing in the sense that this is a generational story that expands, I think 200 years or so. And this also has a family tree at the very beginning. You have which family, and then you look for the name to remember which family they came from. This book is more heavy on what has happened to Black women specifically. Gives you a little bit more into that mindset, especially paired with how the world has passed. It was such an interesting perspective, and a book that I haven't found since, and I really loved it. I think it's so important because then it's so important to understand Black women and where they're coming from, and stop making assumptions on things. And I just love this book for that. Maybe that wasn't the point of this book. Maybe that's not what everyone else got from it, but it really was what I got from it, was a Black woman's perspective. And like I said, especially paired with that other book. This is a book that I don't think I can go into detail because I don't want to trigger anybody that's watching this, but the treatment of Black women through capture, through slavery, through present time. So I just think that this book is very special. I loved it. I know it's huge. I really thought this was a beautiful read. And like I said, a perspective that I never had before. That is it. I think I got through all the books that I have read over the years that I believe are the most important Black history books that I've come across that have hit me the hardest. If there's a book that you read that you felt was just hard hitting and you think that I should read, let me know below. Otherwise, till next time, bye.